Welcome to the last formal panel of the 2017 Fall Residency of the International Writing Program. We'll meet one more time next Friday for a more informal kind of panel titled Images of America, in which we invite the writers to come up and speak off the cuff for a few minutes about some image they will take of their time here in Iowa or wherever else they have traveled during this fall residency. It's usually a pretty fun occasion, and hope to see you all there. The seating is a little different here for everybody because the witching hour begins this afternoon, and just a word for all of the International Writing Program writers. Beginning after this panel, if you go over to the Englert Theater, you will find that your name is on a list, and they'll give you free tickets for all the events this afternoon, this evening, and all day tomorrow at witching hour. If you haven't looked at the schedule yet, it's really exciting. I think you'll have a lot of fun there. Today's panel, Emo, the Mode of High Emotion. As I was preparing my remarks this morning for this introduction, I had the good luck to listen to Anthony Bourdain, the famous chef, journalist, explorer, talk about his show, Parts Unknown. And in it, he remarked that he has reached the age where going out to a 4-hour-long dinner is not as interesting to him as eating street food in all the places that he's gone around the world, because there he has the chance to be really happy. And he said that sometimes a chef who cooks only one dish or 2 or 3 dishes, but has been doing it for 30 years on the streets in, let's say, Kinshasa or in Beirut, may bring more pleasure, more emotion to the table than several courses of food with lots of fine wines. And that made me think about the ways in which we approach writing, whether from high emotion, as in, let's say, the poems of Pablo Neruda, or in a more restrained fashion. And I was thinking in this way of the wonderful violinist Joseph Gingold, who was always praised for the understatement. Today we have 5 distinguished writers from the IWP who will be addressing this theme. And before we begin, I just simply want to repeat my thanks here to the Iowa City Public Library for making this space available to us week after week, and to Downing Thomas and his staff at International Programs who provide the pizza and the drinks which are here on the side this week. For visitors, watchers watching at home on TV, the writers' bios and selections of their work, as well as past presentations from the panels here this fall, can be found on our website at iwp.uiowa.edu. And finally, you'll notice that on your seats are index cards with pencils. Please write your questions up and pass them over at the end of the formal presentation so that we can field the questions from here. Our writers today, beginning on my left with Ghada AL-ABSY from Egypt, who is a doctor and the author of several novels and short story volumes, including Angelica. The collection, The Sons of Nymphs, won the 2014 Organization of Cultural Palaces competition. House of Almond won the 2016 Short Story Egyptian Club competition. And her novel, The Green Cobbler, was runner-up for the 2016 Akbar Al-Adab Prize. From 1999 to 2003, she was a soloist at the Cairo Opera House. And for those of you who have had the good luck to hear her sing, you know that she knows a little something about high emotion, right? Seated next to her is Enza ARREAZA from Venezuela, an essayist for the cultural platform Backroom Caracas and for the magazine Climax. In 2016, she was selected by the Guadalajara International Book Fair for a program on Latin American writers born in the 1980s. Her short story collection, The Forest of Birches, won the 2010 National University Literature Prize of Simón Bolívar University, and her collection of stories, Be Quiet Slowly, won the 2007 contest for as then unpublished writers. Seated next to her is Stuart Lau from Hong Kong, who forms his English name by combining the Chinese characters for study and arts. I guess Stuart is our studious one, right? Yeah. He's published 5 books of poetry, most recently, How Broad Are the Plank Roads of Sunshine, which won the 13th Hong Kong Biennial Award for Chinese Literature. A publishing manager at Oxford University Press, China, he's completing his PhD at Hong Kong Baptist University. Seated next to Stuart is Xavier Villanova from Mexico, a playwright who has had his work staged in Mexico, the US, and in Venezuela. In 2011, the Clark Play Development Center in New York workshopped his Acheron, The River of Tragedy. Ocean Blues was co-written by him and based on his Eponymous play, and it's available on Netflix. In 2010, he won the National Playwright Award given by UANL and received a grant from the Fundación para las Letras Mexicanas. He teaches theater history at the University of Communication in Mexico City. And finally, seated next to Xavier is Sharlene TEO from Singapore, who won the Deborah Rogers Writers Award for her debut novel, Ponte, which will be released next year and translated already into 6 languages. She's a PhD student in creative and critical writing at the University of East Anglia, where she received the Booker Prize Foundation Scholarship and the David T.K. Wong Fellowship. Please join me in welcoming these distinguished panelists.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. I'm talking today about the mood of high emotion, and I prepared the paper with the help of our dear friend, John. Many thanks to John. Really, you did a good job. Thank you so much for editing. Translating the unspoken language. When Beethoven began suffering from deafness, he found a way to feel the sound of his music as he composed it. Actually, he more than felt it. The genius of a man jammed a wooden rod between his teeth and rested the opposite end on his piano soundboard. This is known as bone conduction, the passing of vibrations through the mandible into the cochlea. He circumvented his damaged metal ear by routing sound directly into the inner eardrum. When we write, we just do like Beethoven. We are deaf to emotions. That special, difficult language. We can only describe the echoes of the original voice and draw shadows. The most skilled, expressive writers can touch this circle of feelings like tangents, but seldom go inside. What I can say, however, is that writing is the logical consequence of feeling lonely, because loneliness pushes individuals to listen to their fears, dreams, loves, hatreds, indifferences, desires, and show infinite sympathy to themselves or creatures that bear life burdens like them. Many times, when we dream, we leap out of bed full of passion to capture the dream we had hours before. But when we look down at what we have written, we sigh with dissatisfaction and despair. No, it wasn't like that. It's never the same. That's why the writer is always happiest when the reader says, smiling, "You wrote just what I feel." During my precious pregnancy period, I was inspired to write a novel divided into the different stages of a baby's fetal development, which would allow me to write unique kinds of stories. For instance, in the 4th week, the fetus is in the size of a poppy seed, but on the 33rd, it grows to the size of a pineapple. I would write a story somehow associated with each of these subsequent stages. But after losing my child, I couldn't write a single line. I hope I have the strength to write it one day. Brothers, I lost something big, incredibly big. I cannot even say it. Salah Jahin, Egyptian poet. Why do writers do it? How do writers do it? It's not just about going through a range of foreign experiences. It's about the special talent to learn by receiving new knowledge and sensations, like a baby constantly passing through new milestones. I often wonder, how could Arthur Rimbaud turn from poet to slaves and weapons dealer. And secretly I ask, what extraordinary poetry might he have written in those awful years? In my short story, Saxon's Promise, I tried to get at the feeling of bottled up anger through describing a smell. I completely forgot my favorite scent in adolescence, coconut, which was later replaced by another smell that was similar to me, the smell of the electric kettle every time its plastic almost melts when the water boils and then turns off by itself. In my first novel, Al-Fishawi, I challenged myself by narrating polyphonically through the living and the dead, animals and inanimate objects. I wouldn't call it anthropomorphization because I wanted to tell the story through their distinct perspectives. Rather, it was a type of incarnation. The pigeon narrates from the dovecote, watching from above. The road narrates through the shapes, colors, and conditions of the shoes walking on it. And a panda graffiti with dark halos around its eyes, with a smudge of high paint in one of them, narrates to bear witness to the loss of eyesight many young Egyptians experienced during and after the 2011 revolution. In my third novel, Yalda Night, I innovated further. The dying protagonist, Hafiz, recalls his whole life story over 30 chapters in a narration that is both historical and contemporary. I faced the most difficulty writing his 8 imaginary dialogues in 8 separate chapters, where Hafiz meets 8 mystic poets, the last being himself. He loses his sensations and perceptions gradually. So in each chapter, I was forced to communicate through different language, sometimes only using visuals, or through hearing, smell, other types complete silence, by dancing in an invisible world, or finally, in the last teardrop that falls from Hafiz's eye. As a writer, I believe fiction should balance emotion and thought. The emotional aspect is most powerful because it grabs the reader's attention and elicits a reaction, and moreover, translates an unspoken, unexpressed feelings that awakens our inner consciousness. Thank you so much.
Well, hello. Thank you for being here, and thank you, John, for your work. Well, this is The Oldest Fate of a Dragon. Darling, you think it is love. It is just a midnight journey. Joseph Brodsky. I was 5 years old when I discovered death was forever. I was hugging my teddy bear before lunch when my mother burst into a violent, nervous breakdown. My first impulse was to run the other way and crash into the wall. She screamed and twisted on the floor while I was squeezing my bare head. My father didn't know what to do. Almost 25 years later, he still doesn't know whom to save. It must be so hard for a man to have a wife and a daughter, especially when both are crying. That day, I discovered my mother could die and that she, like anyone else, might also long for it. I do not want to make you sad with these episodes. I just want to point out that we all have a past, a trigger, a private holiday on which we commemorate the birth of black holes. We are born a second time when we learn that our emotions exist separate and apart from other people's at the same time that they join us in a common web. From this moment forward, our vocation will be to feel. With regard to my work, there is not much more I need to explain. I'm a writer of short fiction and poetry. With it, I insist on portraying how the life of a character or the poetic voice can be a hell, a place where it is not longer desirable to live. My hope is to convince the reader that everything I've written is true, and my strategy is to convince him I too lived his past. As a reader, I operate in a similar way. I do not want to be forced into an obvious or redundant drama, and if some kind of dramatic shock does not treat me at all, then I consider it as a failure. Literature and art in general can be considered a laboratory of emotive chemistry, a mirror in which the prince is a dragon and where the dragon cries because it broke a fingernail. A place where people stop asking about the princess. But I'm worried. I love being worried. Suddenly, one day, we were free. It was okay to share one's feeling out loud, make a huge mistakes, and put on a show for others. We get divorces, mental illnesses of medium caliber that do not confine you to an asylum, but rather give you some prestige. I have been to parties where people boast about their new cars and psychiatrists. We gained a territory. We're freed of conventional ties. We are able to build new walls of containment or rupture ourselves from the rest of the world through our self-seduction and narcissism, which then allow us to believe we can rewrite the course of history. But it is true that we feel. When I think of the relationship we adopt with books, music, cinema, in which they act as a crutch to help us advance through the days, I wonder if we have any intrinsic emotional nature, or if we merely develop this toxic ability to perform our emotion in the various scenarios and outlets provided to us by our social networks, in which we have not only the right, but almost the duty to show that we feel anything at all. The act of forming opinions, dissenting, putting our feelings on display, acquire a face so repressive and superficial that it should lead us to once again question the concept of freedom. Sometimes I feel that it's because we are bored that we need this stage to bring our ghost to life before later discovering that we are absolutely empty. When I stop to recall how in my country, and in others as well, people were ready to vote for men capable of harming others, I began to wonder if the problem is not one of intelligence and education, but rather a matter of our fundamentally broken emotional nature, in spite of the books, songs, movies, and happy Facebook posts that suggest otherwise. So, can we trust a creature in need of help to feel? Can we trust beings that need to training to be human?
Thank you for allowing me to be here. And I think John is already tired of thank you, but thank you, John, for his editing work. Okay. The mode of high emotional, the power of screening, the spell of dream accumulating. The word screening connotes two different meanings. The act of carrying, like when the pictures are carrying under view of a motion picture, and the act of filtering and sheltering, covering, hiding, and arranges. If you think carefully, the two meanings are contradictory. The first retain while the latter discard. Together, however, they function like a set of chords in a wheel that generate magic in our mind. By magic, I mean deep thinking that helps us to resist the superficializations. This term is my inventions. Being created by fast web browsing practice, which only inspire intermediate and shallow emotions. This day, I train myself by asking why not instead of why. I not only ask why something is said, but also what sort of things are not being said. This practice has led me to some really great discovery. Let me further elaborate on this idea with concrete scenes from George Muller picture books, The Steadfast Tin Soldier, awarded with the Hans Christian Andersen Award in 1994, which is regarded as the Nobel Prize in the children's literatures. As some of you perhaps will recall, The Brave Tin Soldier features a tin soldier love for a paper Pennsylvania. A Groban's toy, however, pushed the teen soldier from the windowsill into the street, where he falls into the gutter, is carried to sea, and is swallowed by a fish. When the fish is cut open, however, the soldier returns to the room in which the story begins, and is unjustly toasted into the fireplace. The ballerina follows shortly after, and they are eternally united in love. In Muller versions, however, the soldiers is found in the trash heaped in third world country. Muller version is told entirely in picture. While reading, I accidentally discovered a difference in the depictions of parents in the first and third world countries. In the first world picture, only the hands as parent are visible as a baby is handed a potentially dangerous, sharp-edged soldier. My why not thinking we got this, oh, you can see it because in your pair is black and white and is color. Visible as a, my why not thinking we got this as an incredibly absent-minded. In the third world picture, however, the father face is clearly shown making toys from the trash for his sons to play with, an act of consideration. The absent face scenes, it seems, are the remnant of Muller's screening process, the theme he deliberately leaves us with to criticize the materialisms in well-developed society. Follow this clue, we can conjecture that Muller changed the word brave in the original to stay steadfast in his book title to highlight the deeper moral quality of the steadfastness, rather than focusing on the superficial bravery or adventures. I therefore work out a formula. The formula is inspired by Whipper formula poems in Natasha lessons. When I'm observing an event, and a second formula to maintain is high emotional in my poetry when I return from work. And the first formula is a vicissitude of night divided by the studium. We got the inspiration. And you can see because there is a misplace in your document. And then the second formula for the output, memory divided by the palindrome, we got the prop for your work. Studium and the palindrome here are divided from the Warren Parter's books of critical writings, Canberra Lucida. Studium is an objective view, while the palindrome, meaning room or pinhole from Latin, is subject-oriented and acted as a checker. Observer with similar cultural background might see a similar studium, while some may be struck by different palindrome. I will explain using my own experience. Before I came and joined the IWP, I saw the picture of a kiwi and its egg. The disproportion of the pictures are perhaps striking to many. For me, however, it also signified the writer generating its ultimate motive. But then, because there was little emotional to hold my attention in the image, I forget about it entirely. Since coming here to the IWP, however, I stumbled across this string proportion once again in the National History Museum, and the picture is taken in the museum. When I reacquaintance with these scenes, I feel like I had a stroke. Oh, I'm a kiwi. I'm at the stage of the egg with legs. The solitude in its eye become my palindrome. It resonated with my experience in Iowa, and the work I still carry inside me all through my life and work through all through my life. So certainly I will have to finish a kiwi poem if there are no reading or a panel discussion this week. I know I'm complaining. However, I just get forgive from Mary. However, Mary's statement comes to my mind. Don't complain, you are a writer. You can make it. Yes, however, before I make the egg, I know I must first make the cycle between the two formula to retain my high emotion. It goes without saying that this cycle is the spell of architects of the dream held in the egg.
So hi, I would also like to to thank John again, because he was wonderful with the editing. And I'm going to read this paper called Sentio et execrutio ergo sum. And it begins with a quote that says, "A pure feeling that transcends cognition," by Seami Motokiyo, a Nogaki playwright. If I wanted intellectual satisfaction, I'd stay home and read a book. If I wanted a story with believable characters, tremendous actors, and easy entertainment, I'd turn on Netflix and binge on House of Cards. But if I wanted to be profoundly shaken, I'd go to the theater. Drama, to me, is a red X marked genre on a black map that pinpoints the location where we can open our chests to have our foundations shattered. Nothing more, nothing less. Why would any sane person get all dressed, venture full sail into the unnerving traffic jams, pay the price, board a shabby chair, and await the darkness before and after the tempest, if that lost individual does not want some irreverent actor to stare him in the eye, breathe in his ear, spit? This is our collective wound, Thomas. Come, touch it, kill your doubts, feel my warm blood, stick your finger inside my fracture, so we can both confirm our frailty and once more atone for our wrongs. In literature festivals all across the world, people ask if books are going to yield to e-readers, which is similar to asking why theater hasn't been replaced by TV or cinema. Well, it's because people don't buy a paperback just for the unviolated sequence words, as theater suppliants don't undergo the ritual just to fulfill their craving for tales of human descent into the maelstrom. We walk into the mystery to be confronted, to see and be seen, to move and be moved, to publicly objurgate the gods, only to face our fate with grace, claiming, like Oedipus at Colonos, after arriving at his final resting grove, "For my sufferings and the long time that has accompanied me, and thirdly, nobility, teach me to acquiesce." When, fixed in our appointed place with the light still on, we feel a rising tension. Yes, it is about to begin. Once the machine is set in motion, there will be no stopping until the curtain falls, severing our self-assurance, leaving us deprived of our most cherished certainties. So how and why would we want to challenge our identities in this way? That construct of self that we so eagerly build upon day in and day out? Well, for the same reason Mexicans eat chile and drink mezcal, or anyone in this world rides a roller coaster. It is, as Nietzsche laid out, to gaze long into an abyss, so that the abyss will also gaze into thee. To have the contrast of death closeness with a poetic sense of tragedy make us feel alive. And where does it start? With a play, a checkered agent of chaos inscribed with interspaced blades and sufficient ambiguity to enable a sentient being to inhabit this shifting quicksand territory and emerge vulnerable, broken, and raw. It is imperative, hence, for the playwright to renounce all pretenses of acting as a wise, all-knowing creator. If a play is to be the trigger that sets off inescapable emotional time bombs, once the actors viscerally explode on stage, then the writer must set aside his wit and summon that which drives him. When a play is written from a bleeding perspective, the actor knows he is in Orestes' hands, the tragic ancient Greek hero who unwillingly slayed his mother and whose scarlet-drenched pawns seek absolution from Hamlet to Hamlet. He will, just like Prometheus, be required not to act in the sense of doing, but rather its opposite, to withstand the perennial devouring of the thousand-eyed eagle that consumes his bowels every sunset, only to find them replenished each sunrise. To draft for the theater is to be involved in a never-ending process that allows the tide to heat so hard that the audience might very well wreck in the emotional aftermath. When people applaud as soon as the darkness falls after one of my plays, I recognize failure. But if there's an abiding silence of prostration, then purpose has been served, and the gods can feast. I end with a quote by Hamlet that says, I have heard that guilty creatures sitting at a play have, by the very cunning of the scene, been struck so to the soul that presently they have proclaimed their malefactions, for murder, though it have no tongue, will speak with most miraculous organ.
Hello. Thanks for having me, and thanks, John. It's just emotion taking me over. Brief thoughts on feeling and fiction. Yesterday, I looked up the etymology of the word emo, short form for emotional hardcore, born out of the hardcore punk scene in Washington in the 1980s. The word hardcore is punky and porn-like. Yet when I think of emos, fey teens with greasy hair come to mind, scrawling pained lyrics on school desks or the underside of a wrist. To be emo is to emote life as one seemingly endless spell of relatable excruciation. Emotional hardcore, even the phrase itself presents the conflict between vulnerability and something grittier and altogether more abrasive. When we say something or someone is so emotional, it is not necessarily positive. As writers, we have to constantly negotiate between imbuing text with feeling without spilling over into sloppy cliché, word vomit, the overtly gushy, one-sided tirades that make up bad writing and selfish conversations. What a tenuous balance it is between oversharing and revealing just enough. Overshare and the reader gets exhausted and stops following. Undershare and risk being called stilted and stiff. We are not our characters, but writers must draw from emotional reality in order to animate our fictions. And it's a tricky task. Emotions can be messy, ugly, soppy, or cruel. Emotions can leak and seep through pages, screens, and surfaces. I'm from Singapore and have always written about Singapore and Singaporeans. A 2012 Gallup poll revealed that Singapore was the world's least emotional country. Yeah, just 36% of respondents reported feeling either positive or negative emotions. For your information, the most emotional country in the poll was the Philippines. Yeah, Christian. The news sparked a series of Singapore-based tweets, such as, "Singapore ranked most emotionless country in the world. I don't know how I feel about that." And it surely affirmed the Western perception of my country as a robotically efficient, spotlessly clean, neoliberal metropolis. Well, I'm tired of the reductive narratives white men like to impose on non-white nations. Yet cultural generalizations creep into the conversations of even the most actively attentive to issues of social and racial justice. Cultural assumptions and practices affect how we express emotions, and this translates to how we depict them in fiction too. Singapore, as a multi-ethnic, multiracial country, straddles the line between the individualistic speech and self-expression championed in Europe and America and the collectivistic cultural context more common in East Asian countries, where self-disciplined reservation is encouraged. Patterns of emotion are social constructs, and even facial expressions in emotional communication tend to vary. Seemingly affectless narrators can elicit tonal affect too, but only if the narration is bolstered by an undercurrent of emotion, of compassionate intent. So I mean, an example I think of someone who's been criticized for having affectless narrators is Ishiguro, Kazuo Ishiguro, who only won the Nobel recently. So, in keeping with the writing truism, if you don't care about what you're writing, neither will the readers. It's not so much write what you know as write what you feel to be true. When we say that a piece of fiction is moving, that means it's effective. The story has managed, however briefly, to transport us from the banality and solipsism of our daily lives to some other recognizable or mysterious point. There is tremendous consolation in this. To be moved is to feel empathy. Empathy makes you less of a shitty person. To say, that moved me, draws attention to the motion in emotion, the sense of going, if not somewhere, then somehow, and the intimate and impersonal histories that are summoned all at once by good art and good fiction. If we assume that good art is emotionally hardcore, what is softcore emotion? Does it reside in more critically derided forms, such as the romance novels, erotica, or fan or slash fiction sagas, than literary fiction? Is softcore emotion bounded by genre? I think we need to carefully reconsider how we judge serious and flippant emotions in alleged high and lowbrow fiction. I read and write to move and be moved. What is the point otherwise? Writing that doesn't provoke, cajole, or evoke is failed fiction. The opposite of movement is inertia. I think the writer's role is to frame ideas in a dynamic way that feels not just true but emotionally distinct, to give the reader the sense of being in dialogue with another individual consciousness, something more than just words on a page, something moving, a flawed living thing.
Thank you all. What a dazzling set of presentations, and I remind you that they will all be online within the next few days. While we collect questions, I thought I would just mention some upcoming events. This afternoon at 5 o'clock, we'll be reading at the Shambha House, where we will serve more carbohydrates in the form of bagels and also some fruit and coffee and tea. Again, tomorrow and this afternoon and Saturday is the Witching Hour Festival. This festival explores the unknown, the creative process, and includes presentations of new work. On Sunday, we'll have our customary weekly reading at Prairie Lights at 4 o'clock. Sunday night, we'll have Cinema Tech, and Monday, Dr. Ramon Lim, who is one of the IWP's great supporters, will be reading from his new book at Prairie Lights, The Self and the Phenomenon of Life. A biologist examines life from molecules to humanity. Tuesday, Antoinette reads at Prairie Lights. It goes on and on. Check our website for the full calendar. First question I have, and I guess anyone can answer this. Who is your imagined community, and who do you write for? I'm not quite sure how that relates to the question of emo, but if you want to take it on, it's anybody's.
I think that writing for a specific population, specific kind of reader, is not fulfilling the real aims of the writer. So if not the writing is for everyone, for everybody, for every kind of people. I wrote about the Ninites once in a short story. I'm living in Egypt, in Cairo, in warmth most of the time. So why do I write about the Ninites in Siberia? And just to have that kind of something common. Maybe if I am living in a completely different country from Siberia, and this population, different people, different religions, different rituals, but I found something common. So I think that feelings and emotions have a lot to do with this, because maybe sometimes I just see a photo on the TV or listen to something on the radio or read a book. So I'm so moved by what I see or what I hear or what I hear. So I wanted to write about them, not to know more about them, but just to feel their life. Why those people do this? Why they are have such kind of holy relationship with animals. So I think I should write about anything that touched me, that moved me from inside, that I wanted really to talk about them. Or as Tobias Wolff said, that you can imagine yourself in other people's lives. That really I'm trying to do all the time. And thank you for this question.
Can I just quickly follow up on that? You mentioned in your presentation that many young Egyptians lost their eyesight during and after the 2011 uprising. You're also a doctor. Can you explain why this happened?
Actually, it was something monstrous. I don't know how the kind of people that could do it. A lot of streets in Cairo, which are so close to Tahrir Square, where people gathered during the revolution and after, during their protests, the policemen were targeting their eyes. So a lot of people lost their sights. Many of them lost one eye, and others lost the two eyes, and I saw it. I saw it myself. It was so inspiring for a lot of writers to write about this disaster. And I was particularly, I wanted to write about it in my first novel, Al-Fishawi, in a sub-chapter from the last chapter in the novel. It's called the Sap Panda, in the form of the graffiti, painting graffiti in the form of a panda painting. The graffiti is, I can say it's not a new art in Egypt. It's very long ago, since the ancient Egyptian were drawing on the walls. But really, it's heartbreaking when you imagine that the painter herself is painting, who lost her eye, is painting the panda with the sad look. I just always imagine when I look at the panda that he's so sad. So she just came and poured light, yes, light, and white cover over one of the eyes. And this was a symbol for losing an eye that I wrote in my novel. And I can tell that it's even, nothing is more, is worse than death, of course, but it's for me is worse because you live in a society that it's not good with the people who need help. So it was really bad for all of us.
Thank you. Did others want to take on the question of imagined community?
Well, I think you just write for people who want to be there. I mean, I just want to say, like, you write for the people who want to be there. You write for your time, even if you're confronting your time or going with your time's wave. I think you cannot avoid that, and people are always craving for stories and emotion, and you're always trying to give it, like, it's like a conversation. You don't know who you're writing for, but when someone comes to read it, or to the stage, or to the theater, when they get out of their house or buy a book or go to the place, it's the person you needed to write for, even if you didn't know that person before. That person already existed, and that person was waiting for that. That's why I believe a little bit in fate, because I'm a playwright, and I cannot, like, you know, I believe in the gods. And I do believe the person that came that day is a person that needed that story. And you wrote it for that person. Even if it's one person in the theater or 1,000, that one person or that 1,000 needed that story that day, and that's why they were there. And that's the people for who you wrote that story. So that's what you want to say.
No, let's just let the panelists speak. Yeah.
Oh.
Go ahead, Charlene.
I write to connect with people, so like just people that I don't really have an imagined sort of reader in mind. I guess I would like my readers to kind of share on some level a sort of emotional sensibility, but it's kind of both broad and very specific. So I don't know. I think as long as someone reads something and they kind of get something out of it, whether it's sort of a bit of consolation or a moment of like, oh, okay, that makes sense, or they recognize something in it, then that's a success. But I have lots and lots of drafts of like just shitty, like really opaque writing. Yeah.
Charlene, actually, we had a number of questions for you. One audience member congratulates you on your mature reflections. But, and another says that in your presentation, you said there's a balance between oversharing and revealing. Is there ever an appropriate time for oversharing?
Like, you mean in literary terms?
I'm assuming
I think you
this
can
is
overshare
literary.
with your doctor. Like, if your doctor's like, what's wrong with you? You're like, well, this and that and that and that. Like, be as specific as possible. Like, give them as much information.
Oh, my God.
But I mean, I'm of the opinion that in literary fiction, like, I think less is more sometimes, but I think it's about a balance, and it depends on the piece that you're working with and its particular shape.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe for everyone in the panel, the follow-up question is there such a thing as refined and unrefined emotion? So what's the writer's job in terms of refining or unrefining? We know from Stuart we have a dazzling equation now that I think will make our lives much easier to use. Do you want?
I'm still thinking. I'm not good at answering question, but I'm still thinking of the first question. Maybe I combine these two questions and to answer.
Are you putting together an equation for that first question?
He will give us a theorem by the end of the...
No, what I am thinking of the first question is that what I'm writing for, what kind of populations is that? For example, I just recollected the scene that someone is remind me you have to write for those teenagers in the umbrella movement, you know, and in Hong Kong is so famous in umbrella movement. Yes, I do write some poems to praise these groups of organizers. They are just 20-something, and for they occupied the whole central district for 79 days. But within this district, there is no shop window being broken or obstructed. This is a miracle in I think in all over the world. So they have to, I think, what their rationale behind their passions, I really appreciate very much. So I write for them. I really write for them. But at the same time, I write some poems to praise for the police. And then as others blame me about, oh, why you write for the police? Yeah, I really feel a pity for the police. You know, they have because there is one shot that the police is hitting the demonstrator head by saying, "Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's like this, and there is a protester say, "Oh, I'm so thirsty," and then the police just give him his bottle of water, and oh, don't drink all. I have to on duty the whole day, so leave some for me. So they share the water. So I really I feel pity for the police also. I write for police, and then I get others blame for, oh, you don't need to write. You are not right to write for the police. But I do think that I'm right by my own view. I'm just feeling, oh, they are presenting their humanities. Yeah. So I forgot the second question. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So my emotions maybe it can be naturally flow out when you find the appropriate standpoint for your own view of heart. Yeah.
And I just want to say, it's like meat. When you're ordering meat, I mean, there's like, you can get rare, medium rare, or cooked, or overcooked. And I think it's just like everyone has like a different taste. And there's people who really liked it cooked, and people who really liked it like rare. And there's not like the right way of doing it, like meat. There's just like the way you like it. And I think most of us like it medium rare, but
No.
like you know, but you know, you see, this is Maybe you want it just raw, or you don't even want meat in your dish. So,
I knew I was treading on thin ice by invoking Anthony Bourdain in the start of the thing. So if I could just follow up on something that Stuart said, in trying to inhabit the policemen's lives, it also strikes a chord with Enza's comment that our vocation will be to feel. And so I wonder if maybe Enza or others could follow up on that and talk about the ways in which a writer's vocation is to feel. How do you cultivate that, and then how do you come to shape that in your work?
Well, yes, I suppose that we have to learn to listen to each other. We have to read a lot, of course, but also we have to be among us. So I think that that is the first job of a writer, to be open to everyone else.
Anyone else?
I read quite a good sort of analogy. I think it's used more because obviously in affect studies there's affective science and affect theory. So affective science has got more roots in sort of cognitive science, and they were talking about explaining between sort of moods and emotions, and the analogy was that emotions are more like weather and moods are more like seasons. And I love that if you think of a piece of work like a novel or a play, you want to evoke a mood, but it's all about sort of reading how to kind of get there, and yes, to feel, to kind of tap into the sort of many progressions that a piece of work or the heart of a work has to take in order to get to that point, I think. Yeah.
And Charlene, another question here, wonders if you could speak to your thoughts and the pressures that or expectations for Southeast Asian writers to present ideas that are more restrained or reticent. If you feel that pressure, and how do you work against it or with it?
I love that. I mean, because Ishiguro was all over the media recently, and he was saying that when he first came out, a lot of traits of his work were pigeonholed as being sort of Japanese. So they'd say, oh, there's a Japanese restraint, or there's Japanese imagery, so on and so forth. And as a minority writer, he had to contend with what are basically the projections of reviewers. And I think that as a Southeast Asian female writer, I really get this all the time. I mean, to be honest, I don't know whether I should say this on record. I've gone to book launches and being mistaken for the only other sort of Asian woman, even though there might be a massive disparity in age or what we do or whatever. And it's very kind of, I don't know. It's a constant sort of negotiation you have to make with such sort of institutional, whatever, professional microaggressions, which are really a product of years and years and years of sort of systematic, I don't know, structuring that way. But I think things are changing.
hopefully.
Enza, I also wanted to follow up on something. You talk about the ways that we are fundamentally broken emotional nature. Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Well, I think it's a fact that we feel. We have emotions. I didn't want to say that we don't have nothing at all, but what I want to try here is to make us to rethink once again all the time that we need to do it, to think about that kind of nature. I mean, what are we doing when we feel? It cannot be so simple as that. So we have to take care about that, because otherwise it could be a disaster. And we don't like so much disasters, I suppose.
And Stuart, have you actually written that kiwi egg poem yet?
Almost finished. Yeah.
Well, let's see.
Yeah.
Here?
That may be the exactly the right moment to draw this very interesting panel to a close. Thank you so much. Come this afternoon at 5 for the reading.